Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video, I will show you how to connect to AWS VPC resources using AWS Client VPN with user-based authentication. Let me quickly introduce about myself. My name is Thirumavalavan Srinivasan. I have over 20 years of IT industry experience. I'm also an AWS community builder, and these are the AWS certifications that I have achieved in the past. And I am also an ex-AWS partner AAML Black Belt, and I'm also an ex-AWS partner ambassador. I think that's enough introduction about myself. Let's quickly see what AWS Client VPN is. AWS Client VPN is a fully managed remote access VPN solution used by your remote workforce to securely access resources within both AWS and your on-premises network. AWS Client VPN is fully elastic. It automatically scales up or down based on demand. When migrating applications to AWS, your users access them the same way before, during, and after the move. AWS Client VPN, including the software client, supports the OpenVPN protocol. It's the managed implementation of OpenVPN. AWS Client VPN can use either identity-based or certificate-based authentication. In this video, I will show you how to use the identity-based authentication. We will use AWS Directory Service in Simple AD mode as an identity store to provide authentication. Any users which are created in AWS Directory Service will be able to use AWS Client VPN. Next, let us see the use cases for AWS Client VPN. First, a quickly scale remote access. Unexpected events can require many of your employees to work remotely. This creates a spike in VPN connections and traffic that can reduce performance or availability for your users. AWS Client VPN is elastic and automatically scales up to handle peak demand. When the spike has passed, it scales down so you are not paying for unused capacity. Next, access applications during migration. AWS Client VPN provides users with secure access to applications both on-premises and in AWS. This is helpful during a cloud migration when applications move from on-premises locations to the cloud. With AWS Client VPN, users don't have to change the way they access their applications during or after migration. Next, integrate with your authentication and MDM systems. In AWS Client VPN supports authentication with Microsoft Active Directory using AWS Directory Services, certificate-based authentication, and federated authentication using SAML 2.0. To facilitate these scenarios when using the AWS provided OpenVPN client software. AWS Client VPN works with mobile device management solutions to reject devices that do not comply with your policies. Next, securely connecting IoT devices. Create encrypted connections between IoT devices and Amazon VPC resources using certificate-based authentication. So these are the use cases for AWS Client VPN. Now let's see the steps to create the AWS Client VPN. The first step is to create AWS Directory Service. We are going to create AWS Directory Service in Simple AD mode because we are using the AWS Client VPN in identity-based authentication mode. Next, we need to create RSA certificate. We need to create the server certificate that the AWS Client VPN will use. AWS Client VPN can either use the identity-based authentication or certificate-based authentication. In this video, I will show you the procedure to create the identity-based authentication. We need to create only the server certificate for our architecture. For this demo, we will use OpenVPN EasyRSA to generate the server certificate and keys. Next, we must upload the server certificate to AWS Certificate Manager, that is ACM, and specify it when you create a client VPN endpoint. When you upload the server certificate to AWS Certificate Manager, you also specify the certificate authority. Next, we need to create AWS Client VPN endpoint. Once we create the AWS Client VPN endpoint, we need to associate it with a target network. For clients to access the VPC, there needs to be a route to the VPC in the client VPN endpoints route table and an authorization rule. The route will automatically be added when you associate the target network. For this video, we want to grant all users access to the VPC. Next, we need to add the authorization rule for the VPC. Once we are done that, we need to download and prepare the client VPN endpoint configuration file. The next step is to download and prepare the client VPN endpoint configuration file. The configuration file includes the client VPN endpoint details and certificate information required to establish a VPN connection. You need to provide this file to the end users who need to connect to the client VPN endpoint. The end user then uses the file to configure their VPN client application. Next, we need to connect to the AWS Client VPN endpoint. You can choose the Client VPN application from the AWS provided client and select the operating system of your choice. Once installed, we need to use the VPN client configuration file that we have downloaded in the previous step to connect to the AWS Client VPN endpoint. Next, we can test the AWS Client VPN endpoint. Now, next, let me show you the current architecture that I have. So I have already created an Amazon Aurora architecture. This is the architecture that I have already created and implemented. So if you need to know how to create an Amazon RDS in a custom VPC, or if you have an RDS and then that if you need to migrate it using database migration service to Aurora, I already have a video for that, and you can check it in my channel, or I'll give you the link in the description. So this is the architecture that currently I have. I have created an VPC and I have 2 availability zone, and in that I have 6 subnets, 2 public subnets and 4 private subnets. So I have created a bastion host or jump box in the public subnet, and then I have created a private EC2 instance on the application layer level in the private subnet, and then I have created the Aurora database on the DB layer. So it's like Aurora database and then the Aurora read replica. And I have also created NAT gateway to connect to the internet for the private VPC resources. So this is the architecture. I will show you in the AWS console this one before we implement the AWS Client VPN. So next I will show you the AWS Client VPN architecture. So this is the architecture that we are going to implement. Now I will walk you the step by step for this architecture. So like now I have simplified that my VPC resources here. I have eliminated the public subnet part, like we don't need it. Like once we have AWS VPN connection, we can connect to the private resources directly. So that's why I've shown like here, like so this is the simple AD, that AWS directory services, and then I have created the AWS VPN endpoint, and then the like elastic network interface that is created attached to that subnets, and we can connect the end user, like the remote user can connect, establish a VPN connection. Once we establish the VPN connection, we can connect to the private subnet and access the Aurora database. And we will use AWS Secrets Manager and AWS Certificate Manager also. I will show you. Like for Aurora database, I have created, and the AWS Secret Manager is the one that handles the database authentication, like user ID and password and the rotation. So I will show you that and how we can retrieve that credential and then use it. So I think that's enough of a presentation. Let me show you the AWS console, and then we will take it from there. And I connected to the AWS console. I'm in the console home, and I will show you the architecture that I have already implemented for that Amazon Aurora database. Let me go to VPC, show the VPCs. I have two VPCs. One is the default VPC, and I have created a client VPN demo VPC. If you see this one, this is the new VPC that I have created. And if you see the subnets for my VPC, I can show you. I can filter it with VPC ID. And if you see, I have 6 subnets, and then I have 2 public one and public 2, the 2 public subnets, and I have 4 private subnets. And I will show you the EC2 instances. I have 2 instances. The one that is Jumpbox, that's in the public subnet. This we will use it as a bastion host or Jumpbox to connect it. I will connect to this instance from our local system, and then we will SSH to the private EC2 instance, and then we can access the Aurora database from the private EC2 instance. So you can see that like it has that public IP address, and if you select the private EC2 instance, we don't have a public IPv4 address. So now let's see the RDS. I have created the RDS database, and so this is my database, and if you can see that here is the endpoint, and this is the writer endpoint, and another one is the reader endpoint, and we have that credentials managed using AWS Secrets Manager. Okay, let's connect to that public EC2 instance and then take it from there. So I have already created that, saved the configuration. I'll load this one, and if you can see, this is the IP address. Let's go to the jump box, and yeah, you can see the public IP address. It's 44.204.73.78. It's 44.204.73 and 78, and I have also selected allow agent forwarding, and so I can connect to private EC2 instance without copying the EC2 key pair. And if I select that credentials, and I have selected that EC2 key pair, and I have also started that PuTTY authentication agent, and I can show that I have the, so here is the PuTTY authentication agent, and I have loaded the key, my EC2 key pair. So now I can open, and yeah, it moved to my other terminal. Yeah, here it is. So I have connected to that jump box or bastion host, whatever it is. Now let's SSH into the private EC2 instance. Let's copy the private EC2 instance IP address, and let's SSH. Now we have connected to the private EC2 instance. Now we can connect to the RDS database, and I will show you how. We go to that RDS console. Yeah, here it is. Here we have that endpoint name, and also if you can see that configuration, you can see that master credentials ARN is from the Secrets Manager, and I can open AWS Secrets Manager. I open it in the new console, and you can see that secret. This is the ARN, AWS Secrets Manager, for my Aurora database, and yeah, I can click here and go also. Yeah, it will take me there directly. I let's go back to this one, and let's go back to the putty session. I'm going to use this command to get the secret value, to get the username for my Aurora database, and then assign it to a variable username. So it's AWS Secrets Manager, get secret value and secret ID, and then I give that ARN for that Secrets Manager, and then I'm going to query the secret string, and then I'm going to get the username. So I have retrieved the username and then stored it in a username variable. The same way I'm going to retrieve the password and store it in the variable named password. Okay. Now we have retrieved both the username and password for my Aurora database from the AWS Secrets Manager. Now let's connect to it. We can use MySQL, and the host part we can get the endpoint. We can get the writer or reader based on the operation that we are going to do. I'm going to connect to the writer instance, and the port is 3306, and user username, so I'm just passing in the username and password in the command line. So it's gonna complain that it's not the secure way of doing it, but I just don't want to show that username and password in the video, so that's why I just passing it here. Okay, so let's see. So databases, and I have Aurora DB and company DB. I have just created this one. I'm just going to use this one, and I will show you the tables and the content in it. Next, let's show the tables. We have 3 tables. I'm going to show from, and I'm going to show the content for all 3 tables. I just created a simple database and then created few tables and then added some data. This is just for our demo. So these are the tables and content that I have in my Aurora database. So this is the architecture that I have already created. So if you want to know how to create the Aurora database or migrate to Aurora database, just refer my other videos in my channel. I'll give a description to that in the description. So next, let's go and start creating AWS Client VPN. The first step to create the AWS Client VPN is to create the AWS directory services. Let's go back to the AWS Management Console. Back to let's go to directory services. And currently I don't have any directory. I'm going to set up a directory. And then this one, I'm going to do a simple AD. I'm going to use a small one. So this is just for the demo purpose. So for directory DNS name, I'm going to use corp.awsvpnclientdemo.com, and the directory netbias as COIP. And the default administrator user is administrator, and we need to provide the password. We need to provide the password and then remember this one. This is what you will be using it to authenticate. I'm going to confirm the password. So this is the username and password that you need to remember. And for the description, I can say for AWS Client VPN demo. Okay, that's good enough. Let's go next. Not saving this one. And we need to select the VPC. And I'm going to select the client VPN demo VPC that I have already created where my Aurora database resides. And we need to select two subnets, and we need to select the private subnets. So I'm going to select private 1 and private 2 subnets. So client VPN demo subnet private 1, that is in US East 1A, and I'm going to select the private 2, which is in US East 1B. So I'm selecting two subnets into availability zone. You can go next, and then we can create the directory. So this is going to take some time. I'll come back once the directory service has been created. For a while now that AWS directory service has been created. It's currently in active state. Next, let's go ahead and create the server certificate. First, let me open a terminal on my local system. Let me create a temporary directory and move into the directory and clone OpenVPN ECRSA repository on the local computer. So I'm going to do git clone that git repository for OpenVPN ECRSA. It's done. Now let's navigate to the following directory: ECRSA and ECRSA3. Let's go ahead and initialize a new PKI environment. This is the command to initialize the PKI environment. So init PKI complete. Now we can go ahead and create the certificate authority and certificates. To build a new certificate authority, we need to run this command, that ECRSA and build certificate authority, no pass. I'm going to do as the common name as the AWS Client VPN demo. And it has been created. If you see that it has been created under the PKI directory, if you see fearless PKI, then we can see the certificate authority has been created here. And we need to generate the server certificate and key. That will be created under issued and private under PKI. If you see, for now it doesn't have anything. So I'm going to generate the server certificate and key. So I'm going to use this command ECRSA and then build server full. The common name is AWS Client VPN demo and no pass. So the command name is AWS Client VPN demo, and if everything is good, type yes, hit enter. So it has been created. The certificate has been created under PKI issued, and this is the certificate name. And then if you can see that a private file has been created under private, I can show that issued. Yeah, it has been created. You can see that key has been created as well. So we can now import the certificate to AWS Certificate Manager. Before we do that, let's go to the AWS console. Let's go to certificate manager, and I'll show you the certificates. Currently I don't have any in the US East 1 region, that's Northern Virginia. Let's go back to the local terminal, and I have already configured the AWS profile. I can show you that one. I already created a named profile named Thiru AWS profile. I'm going to use this one to import the certificate. So I'll use the CLI command. This is the CLI command. It's a AWS certificate manager command. It's AWS ACM import certificate and the certificate, and then the file is under PKI issued AWS Client VPN demo.crt, and the private key that is under PKI private AWS Client VPN demo.key, and the certificate chain is under PKI ca.crt. So I'm going to use my AWS named profile that I have already configured, that is through AWS profile, and I have defaulted US East 1 region, so it's going to upload the certificate into US East 1 region. I'll show you. So it's completed successfully. It's the certificate ARN. Let's go back to that AWS console again, and let's refresh the screen. So you can see that the certificate has been imported and it says issued. And if you don't see that, make sure that you have set up the AWS region correctly. So I'm in AWS East 1 region, that is Northern Virginia, and my named profile also set as with AWS US East 1 region as the default region. So we are done with that. We have created the server certificate and imported it to the AWS certificate manager. Next, let's go ahead and create the AWS Client VPN endpoint. Create the AWS Client VPN endpoint. Let's go back to VPC console and let's go to Client VPN endpoints here. Currently, I don't have any Client VPN endpoint. Let's go ahead and create one. And then the name I'm going to use it as a AWS Client VPN demo. I'm going to use the same as the description. And the client IPv4 CIDR, I'm going to use 10.1.0.0/16. So that's the IP address that I'm not using in my VPC. If you remember my VPC, I have created using 10.0.0.0/16. So for AWS Client VPN endpoint, so I'm going to assign this IP address range that I'm not using in my VPC, that is 10.1.0.0/16. For server certificate ARN, so we can select the one that I have already created and then imported in that AWS certificate manager. So let's select that one. And for the authentication options, we have two options. One is using a mutual authentication. So for mutual authentication, we need to have both server and client certificate. We didn't create the client certificate. For this demo, we are going to use user-based, that is identity-based authentication. So that's why we have created the directory service in simple AD mode. So I'm going to select that user-based authentication. So here it's Active Directory authentication, and we need to select the directory ID. So you remember we created the step 1, the directory, and then it is active now. So I have selected that simple AD. And for in a production environment, we may want to enable the details for the client connections that will log on the AWS CloudWatch logs, and we don't want to do it for this demo, so I'm not going to enable this one. And DNS server IP address range, for this one, let's go back to directory service, and we have the DNS addresses, two DNS addresses. So copy it, and let's go back again, copy the second DNS address. And I'm not going to change anything in the transport protocol. And here we need to enable the split tunnel. If we don't enable split tunnel, all the connections will go through the VPC client VPN in AWS client VPN connection. That won't be ideal to connect to that the servers on the local network, or if you want to connect to the internet, everything will go through that VPN. So that's not ideal. So if you enable split tunnel, the route table will be appended. It will not be replaced on the local system. So we can connect to the systems in the local network or the internet the way we usually connect. And for the client VPN connection will be used only to access the VPC resources. So we need to enable the split tunnel here. And for the VPC, so I'm going to select the client VPN demo VPC, and security group IDs, I'm just going to select the default security group. So this is a default VPC security group. I'm just going to select that one. And the port, it's 443. I'm not changing anything. And I'm going to enable self-service portal, so the users can download the configuration file. And I'm not going to change anything else. Let's go ahead and create a client VPN endpoint. So it's currently pending associate. So we have created the client VPN endpoint, and we need to associate it now, with the target network. To do that, let's select the target network associations and associate target network. If you see currently it is pending associate, I'm going to associate now, and then I'm going to select the VPC, that is client VPN demo VPC, and then we need to choose a subnet to associate it. So we can select two subnets. If you remember in the architecture, I'll show you that. Let me quickly bring it over. So this is the architecture. So if you remember, we have created a simple AD in two subnets, and also we are going to create association for the AWS VPN client endpoint, and two subnets here, private 1 and private 2. So I'll show you that. First, let's do it for private 1. So client VPN demo subnet private 1, associate target network, and it's going to take a while. Once that is done, we can associate for the other subnet also. I'm going to pause the video and come back once it is associate is completed. If you go to target network associations, it says associating. It's still doing, it's not completed yet. So I'm going to pause it again and then come back once the association is complete here. Okay, it took a while. Now that it says that the subnet is associated, and it shows here green, and it's moved from pending associate to available. So let's go ahead and associate another subnet for high availability. So I'm going to select client VPN demo VPC, and this time I'm going to select private 2 subnet, and I'm going to associate the target network. And let's go back here to the target network associations, and the second one, it's in associating state. Let's wait for this to complete and then move into associated state before we continue next. I'm going to pause the video and come back once this is completed. Okay, the target network association for the second subnet is also completed. Now you can see both the subnets, it says associated. So next we need to add authorization rule for the VPC. So for that, let's go to authorization rules here. Go to add authorization rule, destination network to enable access. This is that VPC CIDR network that I'm going to give. So I'm going to enable access to my entire VPC. We can select the particular subnet or whatever we want to give. So if you go back, maybe I can open another VPC console and I can show you my, here is the IPv4 CIDR range for my client VPN demo VPC. It's 10.0.0.0/16. So I'm going to enable access for the entire, VPC, and then I'm going to grant access to, all users, allow access to all users for this demo. I created adding authorization rule. That is done. So far we have, in this architecture, so far we have created, directory service, that is in simple AD, and both private 1 and private 2 subnet here, and we have created a server certificate and uploaded to the AWS certificate manager, and we have created AWS Client VPN endpoint, and then we have associated that with two subnet, that is private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. We have created the elastic network interface here on both subnets. Once we establish the VPN connection, it will authenticate using directory service, and then once the connection is established, we can access the Aurora database. So we have implemented these architectures so far, and next let's go back to this one, and we can download the client configuration. We can download this one, and next, once we have downloaded the client configuration, and we need to connect to the AWS Client VPN. So first we need to install that Client VPN application. So for that, so we can just follow this link, and then this is the AWS provided Client VPN software. Like we can select the operating system and then download it. So I have already downloaded that for my operating system, Windows, and I have installed it. So I'm going to start that the application. Okay, I have installed and launched the AWS VPN client. So create the profile. First I need to go to file and manage profiles to get started. So I don't have any profile here created, so I'm going to go to file and managed profiles, and I'm going to add a profile, and I'm going to select that AWS VPN client configuration file that I have downloaded. So I'm going to name this one AWS Client VPN demo as the display name, and then I'm going to add the profile. It's done. Now we are done here, and then we are going to connect. Should be some error. Let me try once again. Okay, there was some momentary error. I'm just going to retry it here. And so for the username and password, if you remember, this is the username and password that we have created when we created the directory service, that is administrator. I hope you remember the password. So it's connected now. The AWS VPN client is connected. Let's go to that directory service. Yep, and let's get one of the DNS address and see if we can ping. So I have opened my local terminal. I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to see if I can ping the DNS address. Yep, it works. So now we have successfully established the VPN connection, and we are able to access the resources inside the VPC. Let me now go ahead and show you how we can access the Aurora database. Okay. To connect to the Aurora database from the local system, we need to download that MySQL Workbench on the local system and install it. I'm going to show you the link. So you can just go to this link and download. And once you have download and install this one, I just doing it for the Windows. And then if you have other operating system, you can download it accordingly. So I have already downloaded and installed the MySQL Workbench on my local system. Let me go ahead and bring it up. I have installed and launched MySQL Workbench on my local system, and currently I don't have any connections. So I'm just going to do a connection here. And for the host name, we need to go to that RDS, and let's get the the endpoint for the writer. And the port is 3306, and connection name, I can just name it AWS Client VPN demo. And for password, I'm going to store it in the vault, and I have to retrieve the password from the AWS Secrets Manager. The user is not root, and the user is admin. And for the password, I need to go to that Secrets Manager. I'm going to retrieve secret value. So I'm just going to move this to my other terminal and then retrieve that one. Okay, I have retrieved the password, and I'm going to store it in the vault. And we need to test the connection, and this is going to fail, and I will show you why. And it has failed to connect to that Aurora database. The reason is, if you remember, when we created that client VPN endpoint, like we have, that we have associated with the default security group for the VPC, but the security group that is associated with the database, that is not accepting the connection from the default security group. So we need to go ahead and change it to accept that connection from the default VPC security group to the security group that is associated with the Aurora database. So for that, like, we can go back to VPC and see if you hear client VPN endpoint, and it is if you see the security group that is associated with the default security group. So I'm going to go to the security group, and I'm going to select the security group that is associated with the Aurora database. This is the one, Aurora DB security group. I have created that, and I'm going to change the inbound rule. I'm going to add rule. I'm going to do that with MySQL Aurora, and I'm going to select the security group that is default security group. That's, if you remember, 70C6. So we are going to allow the SQL connections that comes from the default security group, that the ENIs that are associated with the default security group. Our VPC VPN client endpoint has been associated with the default security group, if you remember that. So I'm going to save it. Now it's done, and I'm going to There's the connection. One more time, made the MySQL connection. It works now, and just going to give OK. Now we are just connecting. So if you remember, we have connected to the Aurora database from our local system using MySQL Workbench. We have using that AWS VPN client. Let's if you remember, yep. So you remember we had Aurora DB and the DB named company. So I'm going to use this one. I'm going to show tables. So if you remember, we had department, new hire, and products. These are the three tables that are on the company database, and I can show you. See, these are the data that are in department table. So these are the data that are in the new hire table. And I'm just going to see the tables one more time. Yeah, the next one is the products. You can see that, and we can verify that with our we have still have the connection that is established that we have connected from our jump box to the private EC2 instance and then to that Aurora database. So these are the one. Yeah, and you can see that. Yeah, everything is good, and we have implemented this architecture, so we don't have any jump box or public subnet, and we don't have to go through multiple hubs. So we can just set up that AWS Client VPN, and then once we configure that, we can connect to that VPC resources that are in the private subnet, directly from our local system. That's encrypted connection as well. So yeah, we have implemented this particular architecture. Thank you. And this completes the AWS Client VPN demo. In this demo, I showed you how to create a directory service and generate the server certificate and upload it to that certificate manager. Then we have set up the client VPN endpoint and associated with the target network, and created a authorization rule and downloaded the configuration file, and we have installed that AWS VPN client software, and then established that VPN connection, and then we have connected to the RDS database using MySQL Workbench from the local system using AWS VPN client. So yeah, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the talk to you in the next demo, next video. Please subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye.